Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Journey to Fulfilling Relationships podcast, the relationship show that gets to the heart of the matter, helping you and your family lead fulfilling and connected lives at home, in business, and in life. To listen to other shows, please visit us at journeytofulfillingrelationships.com. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Journey to Fulfilling Relationships Radio. Our purpose is to interview people who can help us improve our relationships and connect the challenging dots at home, in business, and in life. My name is Tagg. I'm a relationship empowerment coach, educational consultant, speaker, and author. You can find out more about my work at taylortagg.com. I also want to welcome my co-host, Noemi Moreno. How are you, Noemi?
Hi, guys.
Good to see you. She's an educational consultant, trainer, and coach. You can also find out more about Noemi's consulting and training at nmarinotaryn.com. That's nmarinotaryn.com. So now on to today's fulfilling relationship discussion with Eric Combs. Now, Eric is retired from the military after serving as a security forces superintendent and tactical trainer for a hostage rescue and counterterrorism unit. He has taught social studies in a program for at-risk teens as well. Eric has been who's who among American teachers and is a 2006 Ohio Teacher of the Year. Impressive.
Way to
Eric
go.
Woo! There's no height requirement, so.
Eric's here today to talk about safety habits for educators, and we're also going to discuss his books and talk about the situation at schools and how we can keep our kids safe. So, Eric, welcome to the program today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. I think the best answer is I have a old Scottish grandfather. He recently passed away a bit ago, but he used to say I'm above ground, which means, I'm on the right side of the turf. So, yeah, I'm doing good.
Tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what led you into the important work you do now in education and safety.
Well, I think the first element to this was during Columbine. I was stationed in Korea, and I was the chief of defense there. So I was responsible for so many thousands of troops from the ground up, air defense-wise. I had never felt so powerless in my life, watching, here I'm seeing kids kill kids. And I think that was an element of terms of when I retired, going to the Troops Teachers program and then becoming a teacher. And I did that, and I kind of came along. And I think the other seminal point, we may have just had another one with Parkland, but was Sandy Hook. And I was a principal by that time in a K-3 building. And when that had happened, I called in a couple of people I had worked with before. I continued to work with the law enforcement community on the outside. So I called some people in, and we started looking at my building of what we could do to change what we do, how we do it, in terms to make both the staff and the kids safe. If I may, I had the honor, and there's another word that escapes me, but it was an honor to meet and speak with the detectives that were at Sandy Hook. I spoke at a conference in Maryland, and while it was an honor to talk with them and speak with them, it was also kind of horrific because I got to see the briefing that no one wants to see. And that element kind of changed me pretty much for good. So I had already written a book about my experiences coming into education from the military side. And then I had kind of dedicated myself. So that one moment, I think, was when I realized that, teachers, kids are getting killed by doing what they were told to do. And to me, I thought there were so many other types of strategies, things they could do without, again, converting it over to we're not in Bosnia, we're not in Syria. This is not a combat zone. It shouldn't be. But what can we do common sense wise to help improve what we do? And that's kind of set me on my path.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point in that you saw kids killing kids. And I want to ask you from your lens, because you've got a unique military background, your lens of why we're seeing so many school shootings and, it kind of why we're seeing them. I mean, it's troubling for us to see this on the news so often. Through your lens, kind of what do you see there?
I think there's a moment in time, and I'm not sure when it happened, but I think we've stopped revering things. And to revere means to hold something above yourself. And how you lose that is things that create anonymity, that I can get on this thing and I can tweet anything I want or say anything I want without repercussion. So therefore, I'm no longer responsible for any type of action that I do. That's probably one big thing. And I think parents may have stepped away, and then suddenly you handed these tools to kids and they're unsupervised. And this is, I mean, I don't want to say Lord of the Flies, but if you think about it, unsupervised kids, and they're trying to all experiment, they're trying to deal with all the pressures of what they're dealing with without any type of supervision. I'm sometimes, maybe this is what you get. On the same token, back to the idea of revering, the capacity to revere, which means the capacity to hold something greater than you, also is directly tied to revering life, human life. And now that whether, I'm not going to be trite and say it's video games. I'm not going to say it's, it's gang, people are, bullying people. Certainly for people who are not well established in their head and don't have these coping abilities to deal with life in the world, and they're not getting any mentor opportunities, that certainly probably has an effect. But I think it's this anonymity and this inability to hold anything more powerful than self. And then suddenly the selflessness is no longer there. You stay egocentric. So it's almost like you got giant toddlers running around. And probably the last bit why we're seeing so many is, if I were to say anything to anyone that was listening, I don't have to get into the argument with the NRA. I don't have to get an argument about the Second Amendment. If you own a gun, great, that's your right. However, be a responsible gun owner and lock them up. That's probably one of the biggest things, other than gang shootings. The majority of the questions I would always have is, how did they get a hold of a gun? And it's because I have all kinds of guns. Even if you killed me, you couldn't get my gun. And that that's the way. So that this responsibility thing, kind of spans between, you can hold as kids as responsible as long as you want, but they're still kids. I remember giving chores to my daughter, and she's a great person and stuff, but sometimes, she didn't get it done. I was the guy who had to come back. I'm the parent. I'm responsible to go back and make sure she got it done, tell her why, things like that. I'm not sure that's happening anymore, or it doesn't seem to be.
So do you think there's a disconnection between the parent and raising their children nowadays with that?
Yes, or there's a disconnect between the parent and all of society. Right. And then we silo only my kid. And as soon as you say only my kid, then forget the rest. You'll do anything for your kid. The problem with that is kids then don't learn how to overcome obstacles. They don't learn how to become self-reliant. And suddenly it's not a coddling. Well, it could be, I guess, considered to be a coddling thing. But I think because you silo them and there's no active way of teaching kids how to behave with other kids, behave with other human beings, how to, behave responsibly with this, or behave responsibly with the information that you can get from this. And it's probably tenfold harder when a parent doesn't know what's going on with this. So I think we have some parents out there that may be well-meaning, but if they don't know, if you're not in your kid's business, you absolutely do not know what's going on. So if you're not, and you should be, until they're 18, this shouldn't be their phone. This should be your phone, and they should have rules with it, just like anything else you assign to a person. So there.
Thank you.
I'll get excited to say something. Yeah.
That's a great segue into your work, Eric, and with schools and educators, and specifically your book, Safety and Security Habits for Educators. Tell us a little bit about that and your system of success for helping to keep kids safe at school.
Sure. So I guess I hold the book up now. I go, there
it is.
There. I pull it up. So the title is Safety and Security Habits for Educators. Actually, a lot of parents have bought this book here in Ohio. I've just released it. And the idea, it's the habit piece that's the element of it. So what I do now is I offer up three major things. One, I can do assessments on buildings, facilities, mainly schools, some churches too I've been working with. And we go in, I unfettered look, which means I have access to everything, all kinds of stuff in terms of looking at physical security, put AR-15s in front of schools. And how unrealistic that is. And most veterans are like, look, I qualified 25 years ago. I'd be next to useless with a gun, right? And standing in front of a school. So why not take a look at every individual school? Because every school has what's called a security profile. Everything has a security profile.
Yep.
And So we take a look at their profile and show them how to strengthen that profile and develop strategies that were common sense, least amount of money, and at the same time tailored to their building. Because what would work in South Central Chicago may not work out in Ada, Oklahoma. What works in Columbus, Ohio may not work out in Bakersfield, California. So so my approach is not to put the blanket. We tend to do blanket statements over everything. It's like, well, all right, let's take away all this, or everyone has to now do this, and it doesn't do anything to protect you. As an example, I went to a school and they said, Mr. Combs, come look. We installed $375,000 worth of cameras, and they said, we're well protected. And I'm like, you're not. You're no more protected than you were when you started. I said, now when something happens though, you're gonna have great evidence, but you're not. A camera doesn't stop anyone. And they looked at me and they went, wait a minute, the way it was sold, and that's what I mean by a blanket statement. It has to be intelligent. I'm not saying cameras aren't great. I mean, you can use them for a lot of things. But for example, did local law enforcement have access to that camera? Could they use it on their entry should an event occur? That's something they didn't even think about. So part of it is when I do this walk around, I give a report out to leadership. I say, these are the things that you can do. And then they decide. They'll decide based on the threat package, that kind. That's the first thing. The other two things is I train teachers, and I'm of the thought that I shouldn't be teaching teachers how to be black belts. I shouldn't be there to teach them how to, okay, when you can take the pebble from my hand, you're done. But because teachers have enough to do. We've already, and plus, what do we want our teachers to do? I'm of the mind, I'm just thinking here, but I want my teachers to teach.
Yes.
And in order to teach, it's a craft. It's a craft. You have to love kids. You have to love what you do, and you have to love your material. I don't want anything to impinge upon that, because I remember the teachers had made a huge impact in my life, and that'd be horrible if I didn't have that. So it's some common sense things to teach them. Some of it would be aligned with, certainly we already have Alice training and how to deal with active shooters, and that's good. But that's one thing, and that's only one potential threat. There's a lot of different types of threat out there. And then finally, the last thing is I teach the school's security and safety team. Now that's more in depth. I believe, I can teach them how to look at threats, how to evaluate the threats, and then they can intelligently, with a different type of mindset, a dispassionate mindset, to say, okay, someone, called in and said, don't go to the dance tonight, I'm blowing up the school. Is it a threat? What type of threat is it? What should our response be? In 2015, there were over 7,000 bomb threats in America.
Wow.
There were 3 devices, though. Wow. 3 devices. What type of devices? So that's one thing I teach them about in terms of, how can you take a look, how you can parse this down and make it manageable so that you can intelligently and appropriately address any type of threat that should come to your school. And then when I'm done, they shouldn't need me again, because then they can, hey, if a new type of threat comes up, they should be able to use the same methodology to approach that type of threat package. And that's what I'm doing now. So
that's excellent.
Well, that's great. I'm gonna ask you in a minute, Eric, about some of those habits that you talk about in your book. But I am curious about things that students, teachers, administrators can be aware of on their campus when hearing about the student that says, I'm gonna blow something up on Facebook or that kind of thing. What do we need to be more aware of? Just
I think the different types of threats that are out there. One, I believe what's called a watch list. If you booted a kid out of school for some reason, and most of the time, for the majority of the time, you don't kick a kid out of school unless it's pretty egregious. It's got to be pretty serious. That kid shouldn't be on campus, and if not, if you don't have a method, for example, of securing your entry and your exits, then you don't have a system at all, which means it will be impossible to deal with. What's probably the first steps. After that, I would encourage kids to report anything if someone that's hurting. If a kid that's hurting, and if you can't handle it, fine, but don't make fun of them, don't mess with them. Certainly all the anti-bullying things out there is a wonderful thing, but here's the other part though. Dude, don't say anything to anyone. It's just you and me, I'm your bud. And suddenly, the majority of shootings that happen, someone knew something. Someone knew something, whether the parent this actually happened one day, that whipped off a dresser, and there was a rifle on the dresser. Their 14-year-old kid has a rifle on their dresser, and there's an incident that occurred. They wiped it off and put the rifle back because it's not theirs. It belongs to their child.
Wow.
So an unsecured, right?
Wow.
Really? Someone knew,
Yeah.
something, and then later that kid took it to school and tried to do something. So I think, teaching kids how to say something and understanding the difference between the repercussions. You might hurt their feelings. Maybe they'll feel betrayed. However, what is the alternative to this if we don't say something? So probably the first thing I would encourage parents and kids and anyone in the community, if you see something, absolutely say something about it. Because if we don't, you might have to live with something really bad, maybe for the rest of your life.
Well, that's a great point. Thanks for sharing that. The next question is just what some of the habits that you incorporate in your book and teach educators as far
Sure.
as understanding safety.
So the book's actually divided in two. One is actual individual safety habits, habits to have at home when you're in public places, because those are the things that should follow you inside the school building. So, for example, I talk about, and there's a lot of people written about other inspirations in the past about this. Gavin DeBecker's book, The Gift of Fear, U.S. Marine Corps Hunter program called Left of Bang. And I've tried to incorporate these kind of ideas, but civilianize them, to make them, one, be aware of your surroundings, and where to position yourself. That talks about how predictable and how easy it is to hunt humans. And people don't do. So I talk about things like scans, how to scan your environment without making it look like, you're constantly, but you are scanning naturally. And where you should position yourself, where your eyes should flow, to prevent yourself from placing yourself into that victim position. So that's the first whole segment of that, is how to do it. As one example, walk around your house at night. So, and button it down like you normally, or don't button it down. Whatever you do at night before you go to bed, go outside, walk around your whole house. Ask yourself some questions, and they're basic questions, but what can you see? Can you get in? Can you get in unseen? And can you approach the building unseen?
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and it's called playing out opposing forces. When I was in Germany, my teens were often hired out. Well, actually, not just Germany. After that, they would hire us out constantly to assess the security of facilities by trying to get in, playing the bad guy, opposing forces, op four. Do the same thing with your school. I did a friend was getting ready to send their daughter to college, and he called me and said, Eric, I want you to. So I went to her apartment complex, and I kind of almost got in trouble because I didn't tell anyone I was doing this. I was just, lurking around and, checking it. And then I finally knocked on her door, and she goes, oh, it's you. Like, yeah. And I showed her some things that she could quickly do to change her profile for her particular apartment. I wouldn't have that knowledge if I hadn't done the walk around first. And that, so one is be very cognizant of your environment. That's one of the particular strategies. And probably the second strategy I'll share with everyone is look at your entryways. I think it's in the high 90s in terms of violent entries or criminal entries into buildings tend to be, strangely enough, the front door. As soon as you turn that handle and someone's waiting, you're getting access to that front door. So I talk a lot about strategies of what do you do prior to that, because as soon as you turn the handle or actuate and pull back that lever, it makes it very, very easy for someone to come in or force their way into your domicile. So what do you do prior to that to make sure that you can prevent yourself from doing it, make sure that only people you want come into your house?
Right. Wow. Thank you for those amazing tips. Those were
Thanks.
very, very helpful.
Yeah, those are wonderful. So I guess, Eric, in general, you said you do train security personnel as well. So from that perspective, kind of what does that look like on a high level?
Well, I was just recently in Texas and helping them do close quarter battle, which is shooting drills. We do close shooting drills because most fights actually happen within 21 feet, gun battles. So I went there and helped deliver a little package of training to do things like that. Other things is working with particular teams, working up with clients in terms of how to work in teams of two for how to react. And not just reacting appropriately in terms of what's your best possible options of protecting the officer and at the same time protecting the public in general when they're engaged. For example, in a large group, and they're at a concert, or it's someplace. How do you evolve and maneuver through that to get to the potential threat, deal with the potential threat, and then and with that mindset of being cognizant of all these other people, around you, what's the best way to approach, to envelope in and protect as many people as you possibly can. So that's kind of some of the stuff that I do. The other side of that was I look facilities. I look at everything from fences to camera systems to sensors. If you have a sensors type system and you're kind of entering, and how people could either thwart or try to thwart your measures to prevent unauthorized access to something.
I have a question. What suggestions do you have for those who are, let's just say, outside and like a drive-by shooting or some crazy incident, God forbid, happens? What do you suggest to people who are outside in the neighborhood or in the parking lot or in their cars and something crazy like a drive-by shooting happens?
Right. So, and actually the first half of my book, I kind of talk about this is, now this might seem a little, I'm not paranoid, but now, and I don't suggest people to do it the way I necessarily do it, but like when my wife and I go out, I know every entrance to the buildings that I'm going to be in. I know how to get out, and I know a second way out. Automatic, I just naturally do it. When I get to my car, for example, and I go back to my car, I don't go straight to my car. I go around to my car, I check out the 2 cars next to it, if it's in a parking lot, and I walk around and I'll check underneath. I actually will, I don't get down on all fours or anything unless I had a specific threat, but I do check everywhere I go. Part of that goes back to that whole situational awareness. Know what's going on. It's a bit like when you're driving the car and it's not knowing the car in front of you or the car behind you. It's maybe 2 or 3 cars in front of you or several cars behind you, being aware of also that particular picture. That will help you gain kind of a sense of what to do should something happen. The Marine Corps have an interesting saying, and it's be friendly and polite to everyone, but have a plan to kill them. And so
wow.
what I mean, what they mean by that is always be thinking of a particular plan. Now, I'm not walking in the room going, how can I kill him here? That's not what I'm thinking of.
Right.
So I do walk and I say, if something should happen, where's the most available piece of cover? Where can I get behind, to protect myself or my family? Where would I take them? It's really strange, but if I'm with my wife, she knows exactly, if I show her a particular signal, that if we get separated, I have rally points. I talk about a point where we were last known together. If we get separated, we'll meet up there versus where we would be corralled to, so to speak. So I keep your eyes open. That's really the big thing. And you'll know, Gavin de Becker's book, The Gift of Fear, talks a lot about this secondary sense of going, there's something not quite right. But if you're walking around not paying attention, you're going to have little or no chance of reacting to anything until after the event occurs. Things like drive-bys, things like initial attacks on one individual that's planned and that's purposeful, you will have little or no warning that happens unless you're aware of your particular surroundings. So take a look around. That's the first thing I would do. Second is I'd have a plan. If I walked up and said, what would happen if I'm always sitting like in a restaurant. You sit in a restaurant and look at what would happen if someone came in the front door and pulled a gun. What would I do? Where would I go? How would I do this? And how would I escape or evade this particular
How
scenario?
about a car?
Same thing.
Waiting for your child to get out, and all of a sudden, there's shootings, and you're stuck in the car.
You can't see anywhere else. You're actually fairly safe in the car. At least you have some metal around you, hopefully, and you're actually studies have shown that you're a little safer in the car than getting out of the car. Now teaching police officers to remain at the vehicle or next to the vehicle, because at least you have some type of barrier between you and who's doing the shooting. And so that's where you think, and then you're safe behind one car, but you're much safer behind 3 cars between you and the assailant. So the idea is to maneuver yourself, and it's really hard to hit a moving target. So movement is life is another good kind of mantra to understand, that as you're moving, and you're moving purposefully, not you're moving running away. That doesn't help anybody. Other than that could get you shot, because most people who run in a panic go in one direction, and they all go like a herd of frightened antelope, and you just become one giant target then. So it's I teach people to separate from that giant herd. Keep an eye on it, because you want to still somewhat stay somewhere public, want to go someplace, like the old classic horror movies, what do? They run, they scared, and they go where? Into a closet where there's no escape. They go to some place where,
Yeah.
and it's like, give yourself options. And that's the whole first half of that book actually the second half is by giving yourself options when you're in the classroom. But the idea is to give yourself some options, and you can only really do that if you're mentally thinking about particular. And it's not a paranoid mindset at all, but it's a mindset of readiness. And thinking, well, should something happen, where would I go without panicking? Without kind of going nuts about it.
So basically, you give us self-awareness of just everything, the environment, and you give us strategies, right?
And people's behaviors. Yeah, and watch people. I do tend to watch certain people's behaviors, and it's they tell the police they can't profile and they can't tell. You can look at all the statistics in the world, and we kind of know who does all the shootings.
Yeah.
I hate that, there's no other way around this. There's two types of shootings. If it's gang related, we know what type of shooter that is. If it's a school related shooting, we've seen through history, there are very few middle-aged women out there shooting people up. It just doesn't happen. So you're a little bit better off looking at and watching the behaviors of those that you're kind of tuning into, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank
Absolutely.
you.
Well, speaking of plans and strategies and putting a plan together, especially a lot of educators and schools are actually, doing that now. So if some of the listening audience wants to get in touch with you, Eric, tell us how they can find you.
Sure. Well, the best is my website, and it's really hard website. It's Eric Combs, EricCombs.com. And then under there, it'll say, how to contact me, and or email me, which is eric@ericcombs.com. And then on a website's also my phone number to call, but the email is the best way to get a hold of me. I travel quite a bit, so sometimes the phone's off on the plane, kind of thing. So
as well, I want to ask you about your military experience as well.
Sure.
Does that give you a particular advantage in this field of safety, having the military background? And if so, kind of what would that be?
It doesn't on one side of the coin. So, for example, I'm going to be training some trainers on what I do. And I'm going to demand that they have two sets of skill sets. So one is a skill set within public education or within the educational field, and the other set in appropriate military or appropriate law enforcement, like an SRO or a community police officer, something along those lines. If you combine those two sets, I think you get a better creature than you have just the military set and assigning it. Because now, becoming aware, absolutely. That's what I was trained from the very beginning. Be aware of your surroundings, being in the field, making a lot of mistakes, and being trained how to deal with those particular mistakes as you go through. Then that's part of, I think, the value of the experience when you go through. And thankfully, I kind of made it out, unscathed, so to speak, and nothing huge. I mean, I'm not some, I'm not a SEAL. I didn't do any of those things, but I did do some high level work in terms of, aircraft entry, asset protection, things like that, and other things I'm not really, at liberty to say, but it's, it gave me, I think, a perspective of human behavior and a perspective and a great respect for those who can operate in teams and kind of know intuitively when we train together and stuff. And if anything I miss from my days in the military is I miss that comradeship, that camaraderie of being able to work together, knowing what what the guy to my left or the guy to the right, or gal to my left, gal to the right, what they're thinking, what they're getting ready to do, and being able to achieve, what we did while in the field. I really, if anything else I could say, I do miss that. Working together, but it does prepare you in terms of being a little bit more aware, a little bit more ready, to make maneuvers.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool, and I know that a lot of educators would want that experience, especially when putting together a plan of action for their school or their district, and I know that you provide a great perspective on that. So, kind of as we wrap this interview up, Eric, and our last question, which we ask every person we interview, is what makes up the heart of your work and your passion for helping kids to stay safe?
I had left the military, worked a year in corporate America. And so I was working for the dollar, and I was working and I thought while you're in. I was enlisted. I was not an officer. I didn't walk out and woo. Not that, our officers do a pretty good job, just like everyone else. But not, while I have a pension, I kept thinking while I was in, oh, I cannot wait to make the real money. And I got out for a year and I made the real money, and it made zero difference in my life. And then I kind of understood that it's not really that. You have to have a mission in life. You have to have, and I really, really kind of grabbed on the whole idea of how do we serve our kids, because I'm serving my future too. It is somewhat selfish. So powerful education could be, the education profession could be, that it could prevent some of the things I had to do in a past career. That's how powerful it could be. And I'll stop at this. I once spoke to a group of about 8,000 educators, and I asked them, what the value of an American education is. And it was dead silence. And the most thing I'm fearful about is I don't think America still yet gets what they're getting or what they want. And if we can't get on board and have a dialogue with that initially, then all this other talk about, well, why are kids behaving this way? And why is the economy going this way? And when we haven't taken care of the base level of how do we produce and how do we guide our future leaders and our future participants in this republic, if we're not even doing that, then I think all bets are off. So to me, being a part of that in helping protect kids, helping protect teachers, it goes hand in hand with protecting the community and protecting my nation again. So that's kind of what drives me.
Well, we appreciate you and appreciate all of your wonderful information. And again, to find Eric, you can go to his website, ericcombs.com, and find him, and also check out his book, Safety and Security Habits for Educators. So again, Eric, thank you for appearing on our program. We're thrilled to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Eric. Great information.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Journey to Fulfilling Relationships. Please visit us at journeytofulfillingrelationships.com. We'll see you soon for our next amazing story.